All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead, pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is Funkle Day, because we're back to a Crown of Swords and Ubudar and and Olver.
And anybody that's been watching knows we're getting a heavy dose of Matt just from the setup.
We'll see. So these chapters, this section is chapter 13, the Bowl of Winds, and then the last in this section is chapter 17, which is the Triumph of Logic. And then it switches back to Rand, or not exclusively Rand, but it switches back to Karheen for a couple of chapters.
And in the
So,
theme of the girls and Matt and Olver, I've got of boys and men, I've got the moral animal, the subtle leopard, and assholeology up for today's episode.
so who's the supple leopard? Is
That's
it the
Matt.
chicks?
Uh,
Giggity. Oh,
Matt's the supple leopard.
well, we start with the chicks, um, and it's a nice change of pace because we haven't had a lot of. We've really to this point had very few Aviendha points of view. Um, but now that she's with uh the girl's storyline, which is one of the main storylines, now that she's there, we're going to get more of it. So we're seeing a lot of what we've already seen through uh through Nyneave and Elayne's story. We've kind of got their personalities and their kind of clashes there, but it's a nice change of pace. It's something different because we're seeing all that through Aviendha's eyes, who hasn't been there for all the times, in the previous books.
Well, and I think this is great for the important concept we've been talking about. It's of the show don't tell. If we were in one of the brains of Birgitte,
Mhm.
Elayne, or Nyneave, we would be told what's going on in their heads, but we get an insight in what their head in their head based on their attitude and their
Mhm.
words instead of actually just knowing. I put up evolution of desire because uh, one of the themes here is men not understanding women and women not understanding men. So
Yep, that's a big one. There's a one of my favorite scenes coming up. I wouldn't say Crown of Swords is one of my favorite books, but it definitely has some of my favorite scenes.
mhm.
Um,
Well, it actually it kind of lightens the mood a little bit after Lord of Chaos because Lord of Chaos was so dark.
mhm, yeah. Uh, especially the Ibudar stuff. At least until the end, then it gets sad. But the Ibudar stuff is definitely the comic relief, and really helps lighten things up. Um, I had a thought in my thought. Oh yeah, it's it, Jordan is doing what he told us he was going to do. I think it was last book, the chapter Figs and Mice, where he tells the reader, your imagination is more than anything that I could tell you straight out. And that's what he does when he gives us these points of view of, so for instance, here's a couple pages in where Birgitte makes a comment about Elayne's bottom,
Mm-hmm. But doesn't
and
finish the comment.
but doesn't finish the comment, but Aviendha can tell that something happened there, and that uh Birgitte is has like won a point on Elayne in kind of the verbal battle there. But it's up to our imagination to wonder what in the world is she talking about there. Um, and any of the various options that might pop into your head when thinking about Elayne's bottom are going to be more entertaining to you than if Jordan just flat out told you something.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's options, you're going to think of multiple things. If he just told you, then it would just be that thing. So he's creating depth by allowing mystery. It's one of the reasons we're doing this reread and talking about this is to to show why this works and works so well and the show was such garbage, because that was one of their faults, one of the big faults in modern storytelling. And we've referenced Critical Drinkers, why modern movies suck frequently. And it's something, I don't think he's done a specific episode on it, but it's a theme that carries through all of those videos of his, that modern Hollywood, modern storytellers have a big problem showing. They're just frankly not creative enough, because it takes a lot of creativity to show. It's a lot easier to just tell. It's why, you know, creative writing and persuasive speaking, if you've ever had to do that in school, which most of us had to at some point, is a lot more difficult than something that's informative. You can be dry, you can be boring, and just say blah blah. Maybe that's what he meant, or she meant. Maybe that's what Birgitte meant.
I thought it said bottom, but when I was thinking of the meme, but it was legs. But still, it's the same thing.
Still, yeah.
You said giggity on her bottom, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have a meme for that.
All right. So that's enough. Gushing over Jordan's writing skills. One of the kind of big picture things in this group of chapters for me, especially the way we start here with them spending several pages complaining about Matt. And I don't want to get political in our fun time, but it is something we talk about a lot on Tuesdays when we talk politics. Is one of the things that, especially in recent history, has made politics so cantankerous, is assigning motive. And not just assigning motive, but assuming the worst about anyone who disagrees with you. And Jordan does a good enough job that you can see where the girls are coming from, but you also have to be annoyed with them because they should know better.
Well, that's one of the differences between men and women, and one of the reasons we're seeing it so much in politics now is because we are about as interwoven as we've ever been in politics with men and women. And one of the things women do more than men, not to get us canceled, again, refer to Dr. Buss there. It's his words, not mine. They do assign motive because it's a protective mechanism, because you're always looking for dangers, because preserving of life is a female characteristic, whether it's their own, because they're very valuable, because one man can make many babies. Women are limited in their supply, and they're protective of their children, because once they've invested the full 9.5 months plus the 2 years of helplessness plus the learning phases, that's a lot of investment that they just put into not being able to make another child. So women are hardwired that way. And it has good character, it has good things to it, because sometimes you can get ahead of the problem. But it also leads to unnecessary anxiety, which is what Nyneave and Elayne have over Matt.
I hadn't thought of this in these terms, but as you say that, it occurs to me kind of, well, duh, that's a big reason Birgitte and Aviendha are kind of the sounding boards here of the contrary thought, because they are both, especially Birgitte, much more masculine than Nyneave and Elayne are. So not only are they outsiders, so they don't have the history with Matt that Elayne and Nyneave do, but they're also much more masculine, so they just think differently. So doubly so, they look at Nyneave and Elayne and go, why are you like this with him? Why aren't you using him? Why aren't you making him part of your plans? If for no other reason than he's ta'veren. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, Jordan shows you how masculine Birgitte is, not just from her flirtations and her ability with the bow and in combat, but the fact that, well, women date across and up. And if you take masculinity as a trait, everybody talks about how ugly Geidel Kane is. he's probably ugly because he has so overly masculine traits that he's like the
He's
Giga
like
Chad.
Cro-Magnon.
Yeah, you've seen the Giga Chad meme, right? With the guy that's
No.
got the chin
Oh,
down.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Add a couple scars to that, and you probably have Geidel Kane. She
Hmm.
needs that because she needs someone more manly than she is, and she's pretty damn manly for a woman,
Hmm.
even though she's supposed to be beautiful. But
Well, that's a good point, that across and up doesn't necessarily mean what what you think it means, especially if you're thinking about it as a man, because again, big theme of these chapters here is we think differently. So for us, across and up is going to mean something different than
well,
what a
in
woman
Western
thinks
culture,
of.
that's usually job and education. And then when it comes to looks, height, and some of those other
Mhm.
intelligence, those traits. But if you're in a combat based civilization, or even killing the mammoth, you look at tribal cultures in Africa, even currently, that go out and kill the wildebeest or whatever, they still correlate attraction with chest size, because chest size is very good for chucking a spear.
Mm. There's also going to be a difference depending on how you rank order priorities. So if you're someone who is a gym bro, you're going to prioritize uh, body fitness looks more so than someone who's maybe more intellectual, because
Mm-hmm.
to you that's a crossing up, because you rank order those things. Not that you won't notice those things, not that those other attributes won't necessarily impact, but depending on how much you prioritize things, that's how much you're going to look for those priorities in someone else.
Well, in this, we'll probably get back on the rails here in a second, but this actually recently, because I've been following the relationship kind of psychology uh, track a lot. And in the dating world, one interesting bit of advice I heard from one of these psychologists was, if you have something that kind of semi defines you, lean into it, because you're not going to be as universally attractive, but the people who are attracted to you are going to be all in. So, say you're into the bodybuilding lifestyle, lean into it and get as big and freaking massive and vascular as you can. And yeah, you're not, most girls are going to go, ugh, too much. But the ones that like it are going to love it. If you're a little bit of the nerdy type,
Mhm.
lean into that, because the girls that like it love it. And you're going to end up being able to date outside of your normal range because you're specialized.
Mhm. And there's going to probably be a stronger bond there, because you're becoming linked with someone who values those traits that you value,
Oh,
that
yeah.
you're
And that's
putting a
why I
lot of
hate this whole
stuff into.
TikTok Instagram reel movement by these girls. Like, ooh, he looked at me in the gym. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, before dating apps, what better place to meet somebody than in the gym or at church or in school or something where you ought to already have common things to
Yeah,
build on.
you wore that top so that he'd notice your shoes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, no, not only that, it's just, if don't approach a woman. Now the thing is, never approach a woman in the gym. I'm like, but I already know we both like training. We have something already to talk about, and then we can expand from there.
Hmm.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Yeah. There shouldn't be, but we're gonna go down a rabbit hole here,
Okay,
but we're
no, back to the
idiots.
books. So what I like, so I'm going to get you started here this time.
Uh-huh.
What I like about this first scene is we get it from Avienda's point of view, and realistically, her biggest role in this scene is to get the ball rolling.
Mm.
And then we get all of the interaction from her perspective, but not involving her direct opinion, other than, hey, what about this idea?
Yeah.
Because this thing exists.
Yeah. Because back to the outsider looking in and thinking differently that I pointed out early. She's the one who says, "Well, this doesn't make sense because I don't have any baggage with Matt, so blah blah blah." And then you get the reactions of Elayne and Nyneave, who are, ugh, Uh,
Which is
and they
funny
go
because
round
of
and
it's a
round.
cultural thing too, because she has almost no baggage with Matt, but she spent more time with him than these other girls have, other than Nynaeve
Mm,
when he
that's
was
a
a
good point.
child. In adventure time, she's pretty much spent as much time as any of the other
Mhm.
girls.
Well, that's probably a big reason she doesn't have a she might not necessarily have a positive opinion, but a bit she doesn't have a negative opinion because she's seen him at his best and exhibiting traits that she highly prioritizes, both as a personally uh 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 powerful warrior, but then also directly and hearing third person about his abilities as a war leader,
Hmm.
which she also highly prioritized. I mean,
Yeah,
remember,
wasn't she even
Rourke
at
is one of her.
wasn't she even at the meeting where Bale and Rourke and everybody brought him in to look at the table?
She wasn't there,
No.
but she would have known about it, and certainly she would have known very quickly about. No, she's the one who tells when she's trying to hide Rand's clothes because he's supposed to be in bed because he hasn't fully recovered yet. She's the one who tells Rand that Matt killed Couladin.
And she did say he earned a
Mm,
bunch of G in the
yeah,
process. So
yeah. So uh, also, I feel like Matt's sense of humor and the way we see him interacting with
is
Aiel
more in
in the
line with
last book
Aiel
is more in line
because
with
yeah,
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 Aiel.
it's a little sarcastic. It's a little dark.
Hmm. Yeah. I like my humor like I like my coffee, dark and bitter. Um, all right. So I also appreciate the once we get past that and move on to what the main part of this chapter is about, where they get out of the boat and they're making their way, trying to get onto the Sea Folk ship. We get a very small snippet there. Um, where is it? It's on page. Well, okay, but before I get there, the kind of the final bit on the Matt conversation is page 322, where um uh El- Elayne has decided that not only can we use him to help us, but we also need to help him because that is one
We
thing
need
we
to
need.
domesticate him,
Mhm. A decent woman cannot be in the room with him. Oh, do wipe that smirk off your face, Birgitte. I
which is
value
funny
our
because
fantasy
the
sometimes.
backhand of that is that she just called Brigitte not decent.
Hmm. So that's Elaine's. Well, yeah, that fits perfectly. She is the she is the good girl from the good side of town who's going to change the bad boy from the other side of the tracks, which is what Rand is.
Which is what every romance novel is.
So she's that archetype. So it makes sense that, well, of course she thinks she can change him. She's that girl. And then Nynaeve is the stubborn one who has already made up her mind about him. The man was born just to be a trial, Nynaeve muttered sourly. Um, where is it? Yeah, there it is. It's at the bottom of that page. So distances bother me sometimes over water. I think I will look only at the ship myself, nothing else. Aviendha nodded. Her near sister had a fine delicacy, and they went up. So Elayne is compassionate enough to know that Aviendha is going to have an issue here, and um, because water is such a frighteningly big deal um, to the Aiel, but I can't just tell her, "Hey, if the water bothers you, just look at the ship." don't look out at the water. She can't just say that because she's also someone who's very prickly about honor. And you can't, so that would be an embarrassment to her. So she's also savvy enough to put it, as Aviendha says, delicately. Which is actually something of a gripe I have about the rest of this chapter, which is the way that Elayne and Nyneave get taken advantage of by the used car salesmen that are the Sea Folk. Because she's really good at this stuff. She is a good reader of people because that's how she was raised and what she was raised to do.
In defense of Jordan, though, she had a textbook idea of the Sea Folk, and when it was thrown on its head, that puts you in a mental state where you're in a little bit of a mental panic,
That
and then you find yourself one step behind.
That's true, and her only direct interaction so far was with a group that was very different in personality. They were much more friendly. They were much more accommodating.
Well, and also very different in situation because the bargain had already been made by Lan and was it Moraine and Tom all together?
So. Yeah.
So the bargain of passage had already been made, and
that's a good point.
They didn't have to this part of it.
But something that, and maybe there are times where she does it later, and I just can't think of something off the top of my head, but she keeps getting flustered, seemingly. We aren't seeing it from her point of view, to be fair, but she keeps getting seemingly flustered with Nyneave and trying to smooth things over when she should be playing off Nyneave. She should know enough and be savvy enough to be the good cop to Nynaeve's bad cop, instead of letting Nyneave ruffle her feathers and kind of upend her flow. And we see that from Faile. She does that with Perrin. She's going to do it more coming up, but we've seen it in the past where he is so blunt and direct because he is not a Game of Houses person that it throws people off balance, and she uses that to her advantage. Elayne should be savvy enough to see that and do that with Nyneave.
Except they have a female-female conflict versus a female-male conflict.
That's true.
Remember, people jockey for positions in different ways. And at this point in the books, we still have a position battle between Elayne and Nyneave. Elayne believes because they're in the city and in diplomatic situations, she should be in charge. And Nyneave just can't help but want to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Hence her problems with the power.
There's also and they have mentioned this before. I think we've had this scene before where Elayne, there's a scene where Elayne says something to the effect of, I'm trying to figure out how to be Aes Sedai.
Remember, this is Nyneave.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So Elayne is capable of the Rosebud, but
true. And they are still trying to figure out how to work with each other as full Aes Sedai. So there was a scene,
and they're not
earlier.
Indoctrinated in the you're stronger with the power, so you're in charge.
And I don't remember if it was earlier, or if it comes a little bit later, of Elayne saying, "I'm trying to figure this out, and I know you're supposed to be in charge, but we need to figure out how to work with each other. I don't know how this is supposed to work, where I'm supposed to defer to you because you're so much more powerful than I am." And this also may be some projection, not to spoil anything, but just the way the Sea Folk and Sea Folk bargains play into things later get a little annoying.
Yeah. He tries to give the air that they're just so good at this that it's hard to get the one up on them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it almost becomes a clown world.
They don't get humbled the way other people do.
Like the Greys that negotiable. Well, let me put this in spoilers.
Yeah. And
Okay.
we've kind of complained about that both in spoilers and in the non-spoiler talk, that at about this point in the story, the Aes Sedai start to become a punchline.
Yeah, it's understandable in this situation because Elayne she's everything is novel to her because she just has a textbook idea of things. And so do the sea folk. They show their weaknesses. You're asking Aviendha if, they have to kill a man every day or stake their men down to have schnoo schnoo. It's
I don't mind. Go ahead.
yeah, so they're just as ignorant, but the problem is we're in their world at
Yeah.
this bargain. So this scene makes sense, but going forward, it just seems like this scene is repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah, and there is a scene later where they do it better, but I
Do that
feel
in
like it went a little
spoilers.
overboard here.
Yeah.
Um, but that is the main thrust of this chapter, is to the title chapter, the Bowl of the Winds, what that is, how it clearly is not just a Turan Griel, but is something that's a big effing deal to the sea folk, and they, it's the kind of the root word of the Ongriel, Songriel, Terran Grail. It is their Grail, basically, is what it seems like.
Now, what I would have liked a little more of, and I did it, I skimmed through this part, uh, because it's part of their prophecies with the Cormor.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked more of them saying the prophecy, like we
Yeah.
get with the dark prophecies, like we get with the the prophecies of the dragon, and something to give us kind of like a tease of what it should mean to us, but in like a cryptic, old school, old English kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Um, well, something else to point out before we move on, because there's an interesting parallel here. This mirrors something that happens in a couple of chapters here, with Satala Non and her husband,
Mm-hmm.
after Matt gets attacked, um, and the way uh the I forget what he's called, the Master of Blades is
Mm-hmm.
what I assume Borak is, because she's the mistress of ships. That she's the boss, but between the two of them, they have a interesting relationship where they are the masters of their particular specializations, but they also command, he may be technically subordinate, but he commands a high degree of respect, so that he just says a few lines of, it, really kind of in the same way that Birgitte and Aviendha did when they were talking about Matt leading up to this. He kind of plays that same role, with the Mistress of Ships here, of, you know, a few lines, and that's enough to kind of shift her direction and say, okay, let's hear what you have to say, and let's sit down and talk about this, because Borak commands so much to respect that she heeds his advice, even if she doesn't necessarily defer to him because she's the boss. It's a try not to get too political before we get canceled, with Matt's Me Too moment, but uh it's an interesting take on what most people, I think, would call a matriarchal society, but it's not really, because I think when people think patriarchy or matriarchy, kind of the 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 suffix there, it aligns with tyranny. So it's a tyranny of women or a tyranny of men. And while the women are the boss in certain regards, they aren't tyrants, and the men aren't subservient. They play a different role.
Well, this is again getting back to male female differences. Women prefer, and this, okay, so great example of this is, honey, where do you want to eat? That old trope, right?
Yeah.
Women don't want to make the decision. They want input on the decision. They want input on a group decision, is what they want. Whereas men tend to want to solve the problem and get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you want to eat, hun? I want Chinese food. Okay, King Buffet. That's how a man wants it to go. Whereas the woman wants to be like, well, what kind of food do you want to eat? And then let's just talk over our options, and then you make a decision. That's why everything gets confused with the patriarchy, because when it comes down to it, there's so much waffling on one side that the decision finally has to be made based on the information that's had.
Mm-hmm. At some point, it's nut cutting time.
Mm-hmm. Whereas the Sea Folks seem to have reversed that, where it's his input, but she makes the final decision.
Well, and I hadn't thought about this, so we started talking about this, about the parallel between what goes on with the Sea Folk and what goes on in Ibudar, because there it is a matriarchy, and yet there's a very, in modern terms, sexist reason for it, because women are better at certain things. Women are better at, well, and it's the Aiel too. The roof mistress. Rourke may be the clan chief, but his wife is the roof mistress, because women are better at making a home. A man is the one who's going to be good at building the house, but women make the home. So all innkeepers are women in Ibudar, because to them it just makes sense. As Satalana is going to say later, I won't tell you, who to pull up which nets and when, because that is a male thing. That is a physical labor, right? That you're out there fighting with the elements and performing physical labor, versus her job, which is making a home, not just for her family, but then for visitors as well, as an innkeeper. And she is going to be naturally better at that, and he's going to be naturally better at running a fishing boat or a fishing fleet.
Well,
and same
yeah, go ahead, keep on.
Well, and then the same thing with the Sea Folk. The reason the ship captains are women is because these aren't warships. They have to fight sometimes because that's the nature of the sea, but they're floating homes. You have to have a coalition, and you have to have everybody working together, contrasted with I don't think it did very well, but one of my favorite historical movies is Master and Commander. It's a little slow paced, but I love it because it really shows you the life of the Age of Sail. And one of the kind of the lines in that movie is Russell Crowe, the captain, talking about how he is the master of the ship. He has to be a tyrant. That was the way it was thought of when you had a crew of all men, is that you had to have a tyrant in charge.
Well, that's where I was going to go, because now we talk about the difference between male and female coalitions. Male coalitions are actually larger in number because that's beneficial. If I'm the primate group that has to defend my territory against the other primate group, I want numbers. And that automatically leads to a hierarchy and specialization. You have to have both for male coalitions.
Mm-hmm.
Female coalitions are all about relationship. And so you have to have that duality, where the master of ships, when master of swords, master of blades, when shit goes down, he's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
But exactly. when it's about the relationship, when it's about the progress of the ship, because they treat their ships as living beings, she's in charge.
And balancing the factors. He is also, we saw the first time we saw the Sea Folk, he was in charge, the husband, the Master of Blades was in charge of was also in charge of the cargo. So he was in charge of the negotiation, which is different from other places where we've seen the women are merchants. So he was in charge of the negotiation, but she was in charge of figuring out where to sail because
Yep.
she had to balance all these other factors as well.
And that comes back down to decision making again too, because when you're talking about a relationship, you want to take in all of the information and get everything together and make sure nobody's being pushed away, make sure everybody's at least getting some sort of benefit from the situation. Where me, you, and Chuck are facing down the mammoth. Well, Heath, how do you feel about this situation? If you stood over here, we're dead.
That's a that's a good analogy. Uh, we didn't talk about it a ton when it happened. I think because we hadn't done as much sexy time talk. But that scene back at the beginning of Shadow Rising, it is another moment of why Jordan now has to be canceled when he used to write women so well and be applauded for it, because she didn't have time uh to explain to him to work the coalition as she normally would, and she had to protect secrets. She had to protect the secrets of the Aes Sedai. So, as she put it at that scene, as the captain put it, that she had to treat her husband, the cargo master, as the lowest recruit. And so she was going to have to make it up to him later. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod, giggity. That's how women do.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of their strengths. That is one of their abilities, their weapons, their arrows in their quiver, and it makes it work.
Well, so a little tease for our next social cultural episode. I think the correct title I already have is Love and War, because I need to dispel the myth of what romance and love actually is. And you're going to talk about a lot of Civil War stuff. So it's going to be a good little combination. And yeah, it's just, I think it's going to segue really well from this little episode.
Yep. All right. So I had a segue into the next chapter, and then hierarchy. Yes. So then we shift from coalition to hierarchy because we see Matt being Matt here. And so it starts with how do you pronounce his name? Nalison?
Nielsen? Is he in the dictionary?
He should be back here. Well, we've already seen him before, so he might not be back here because it usually just shows you new people.
Yeah, and my only complaint about the big book is it doesn't have the pronunciations in it. It just,
oh, really?
Yeah. When do we first see him? Book 3?
I think so. The Wheel of Time wiki has pronunciations, I'm pretty sure. It usually does, but I don't see it here. Son of a diddly. I thought I remembered it having pronunciations. Well, anyway. Now listening nails whatever. So he's being
he's not in book 3, and the next time we see him is book 5, and that's the one I don't have the dictionary in because Hamilton ate it.
As he does. So he's being direct, but Nelson is both high enough in the hierarchy as well as friendly enough with Matt to speak bluntly and openly of, expressing his concerns that Matt was wrong and we're going to lose all this money. And I had this seamstress I wanted to buy a pretty gift for. And Matt just says, no, do it. I know what I'm doing. Do it. And then we'll see it again a little bit later when he goes back to the inn and the Red Arms are there and he's the boss. So we see that contrast as we shift immediately to Matt, who is the boss. And it is not time for not that the boss can't have input. But to your example of you know, where do you want to eat? And I told you to watch Formula One Drive to Survive on Netflix because there's some interesting stuff in there, and you see it in a corporate sense as well, where the team owner, walks into a meeting and says, "All right, you've got me for 15 minutes." So he's going to take input. He's going to hear what the subordinates have to say, but there's a timeline on it, and then a decision is going to be made, by golly. And that's how Matt is. Uh, because he just consciously and subconsciously knows that needs to be done. But then also in this specific instance,
Nalecion,
Nalecion,
apparently. Nalecion, with the emphasis on
Nalecion,
the Lee.
Nalecion.
Nalecion.
Okay.
So the interwebs tell me.
See, I was taking that first part as so the L, and I was splitting the syllables. Anyway, Nalecion. Um,
Gosh darn it, ours was easier to say.
yeah. Well, it also is because, gosh, when did you introduced me to these books when we were freshmen in college? So 1990, the fall of 98 is how long I've been reading this crap.
And I've
And
been
so
reading them since 92.
so that's how ingrained these pronunciations are in my head. Uh, but to something you've talked about before is the other reason Matt is so masterful, so to speak, is because he knows what he knows. And he is supremely confident, and he makes the point more than once that he really enjoys evaluating horses because he knows for a fact there's no confusion there. This is him, the real him. This has nothing to do with the memories. This has nothing to do with the stupid dice rolling around in his head or his Tavarinness. He got this from his father, who's not an alcoholic asshole, damn it. He got this from his father, who taught him from a young age, partly just by example and then by direct teaching. This is how you evaluate horses. And so he is supremely confident in his ability to evaluate horses. All right, moving along because we need to move along. Um, Interwoven in all of this is a really enjoyable chapter to read for me, because if it's your first time reading it, you can probably figure out what's going on here before the reveal. But even if you know what's going on, because this is a reread, this is a really fun chapter to read because of the way Jordan weaves in uh what's going on right now with the racetrack and the betting and Olver and all that, and this woman in the white plumes. Who the heck is she? What's going on here? And the way it he slowly adds more and more and more until suddenly you get the flashback and you get the italics of from the eye of the world, and it's, oh, she's that lady.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's your first time, you get struck with it just as Matt gets struck with it, and the build to it is so good. This is a great example of why do people who like Jordan, or why do people who are attracted to his books, this is a great example of why, is because he is a masterful writer. He is great at his craft. Um, and the other thing I like about it is he reminds us of what has happened to Matt before. That Shadar Logoth dagger, he still feels those effects.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a problem for him that he's still working to overcome. Um,
And realistically, how lucky she was, because he dimpled it into her skin, but had it even
Nicked,
slightly
yeah.
penetrated the surface, she was dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Elysian shouts out, "Where are you going? I saw a woman who tried to kill me," Matt said over his shoulder. "Give her a trinket next time."
Oh, men and women.
Ah, men and women. Um, I like his descriptions. You really see the scene as he's rushing through the crowded streets, and all the the merchants, the people hawking their wares along the sides, and we get a major prophecy revealed here. Is it does this come from the prophecy or from the snake people? I can't remember that his
I think
signet
it's
ring.
I think it's the snake people.
It's such a throwaway scene, and yet we, the reader, especially if it's a reread, but you should see it on your first read too, of holy crap, when you see what's on the signet ring.
Well, not only that, it's two of them. Because if you're a first time reader, you probably read that scene where he remembered who she was, and you're like, something's tickling my memory. And you probably went back to the Eye of the World to look it back up. Whereas on the reread, during that part of Eye of the World, you're like, oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, where is it? I was looking for the specific description of the ring, and I can't remember when he actually looks down and sees it. Um, okay, you don't actually see it yet, do you? Because he's in such a hurry that he just throws some coins on the table and runs after her. I like the where is he? All right, 354, the end of the chapter. Someone said, Carradine. It was a scrawny, white-haired fellow lounging nearby in the shade. Matt looked at him questioningly, and he grinned, showing gaps in his teeth. His stooped shoulders and sad weather face did not fit his fine gray coat. Despite a bit of lace at his neck, he was the very picture of hard times. Um, the old man tapped a gnarled tooth against the side of his beak of a nose. Both looked to have been broken several times. So I again, more showing and not telling. He doesn't tell you who this guy is, and then here in a little bit, you're gonna get a perspective from him, and a lesser writer, a modern writer, would have called back to this scene when this old guy is sitting on the barrel watching, what's going on there. I think it's the end of the 17th chapter. A lesser writer would have called back to this scene and had a sentence thinking about, talking to Matt. Jordan doesn't do that. He doesn't need to do that because he describes the scene well enough. He trusts his reader to not be a moron and to realize, oh, this old guy is that old guy. And then again, when he shows up later. So he's
and if you didn't put it together, you were in the forums arguing about it.
yeah, it was pretty obvious. Because of and the big clue there was the broken nose and the broken hands. Because that's the link. He doesn't think about this scene. He just describes it again in a slightly different way about the hands being too old and too broken to wield a sword. So now he wields two long daggers, long knives. All right. So I suppose besides the hat and the Funkle mug, maybe I should have told you to put your 333 shirt on as well, because the next chapter is Samael. Um, okay. What are your thoughts on this chapter? With
Insects.
with Carradine and Millie, the lady in the white plumes, and then Samael shows up.
Well, my initial thought, especially with the title of the chapter, was we're looking at timelines, right? And we have things that are happening in the world based around Rand. And if we really look at the timelines, he's in the box about this time. And now we see vermin everywhere. And now go back however many episodes of this channel, we talked about it, entropy and chaos. And we see an acceleration of that while he's in the box. And we're getting a clue of that right here.
That's an interesting point, especially the chapter title Insects. There's a can't remember who wrote it. There's a short story that and it actually there's a season 1 or 2 of MacGyver actually used this sort of story as an episode of ants in Brazil. Billions of them. And this it's based on actuality. This will happen. That I can't remember which type, but an ant swarm will get so big that it will move across like a combine cutting wheat, and it will just annihilate everything in its path. And that's, people talk about the balance of nature, and I went on one of the YouTube channels I watch, the Little Platoon or Little Platoons, I don't remember. British guy, so he's cheating because he has a nice voice. But he did a long, like a 2.5 hour critique of the newest Avatar movie, and there was a lot of that in there because it's so sickeningly blatant. There's no subtlety to it whatsoever about the beauty and the balance of nature. Nature isn't balanced. It is forces of entropy clashing against each other that ends up making balance. But the ants themselves, all they care about is annihilating everything in their path. They are going to eat every animal, insect, plant, everything in their path, in the same way that a fire will burn away everything in its path.
Well, let's start from the beginning. We have, so the opposite of order when it comes to the states of matter is gas, right? And the epitome of order is solid. So we've got this thing called a plant that takes gases out of the air and energy from sunlight and creates order out of disorder. And then we eat the plant, and then we do our thing, and eventually it becomes out in nature. And the ants are part of the breaking down process, just like bacteria in our gut is part of the breaking down of that order, so we can actually reorder it in our own body. So like you said, it's this constant, you can't even do a yin yang with it because it's so interwoven.
And the dark one is trying to break that opposing force so that there's nothing to stop that entropy from just annihilating everything in its past.
And one of the great ironies of nature is something as ordered as an ant bed is responsible for breaking down the order of other parts of nature.
Have you seen these videos of I can't remember who does it. They basically took this giant vat of molten, I think, lead and poured it over an ant mound.
I've seen aluminum.
Aluminum. Okay, that's what it was. That makes more sense than lead because of its toxicity. And then they dig it out to show you what's going on under the surface. And it is like a work of modern art in its intricacy. And yet that is something that is created by an inherently chaotic thing. Like I said, that will just eat in everything in its path. And yet it creates these incredibly intricate
I'll give
webs.
a human example.
Meh.
You know, you go to YouTube and look up an EDM concert. And look at how everybody gets in rhythm in that hive mind, even though it's this massive mess of people.
Well, back to this chapter, this is, so the insects, the clear allusion here is that these people are themselves insects. So Millie is an insect under Carradine, who's an insect under Samael. Or Old Cully, who is an insect under Samael. Yeah, and on it goes. And the reason Ishamael's the only true believer is because he's the one who wants the nothingness. He is a nihilist. All these other people are using chaos to try and create their own order, to carve out their own sphere of influence and power and wealth or whatever it is they want, not understanding or not caring or thinking that it won't affect them, that all this other chaos and destruction is going on outside of them.
Yeah, Shamael's the only one who understands that physical suicide does nothing. You need soul suicide to end the suffering.
Mm-hmm. Um, it's so the rabbit holes I've gone down recently are interesting in how they're connected. Because I mentioned last time that I'm going to talk Civil War because I finished this biography of Stonewall Jackson, and that sent me down a rabbit hole of rewatching the Ken Burns series. And right before I did that, I had gone down this rabbit hole of JFK assassination because there's this recent document dump of recently declassified documents relating to the JFK assassination, and there are some very interesting parallels between uh, Oswald and Booth. And the law of big numbers means you're always going to find interesting parallels if you look hard enough. But I mean on their personality, and this is something that is, we could spend a 3-hour episode on this. So I'll try not to go down too far down this rabbit hole. But they were both losers. They were both narcissistic losers. So they wanted to be big men. They more than just wanted to, they thought they should be. They thought they deserved greatness in much the same way that you see. And I don't know how much he did this on purpose. I would love to you know really dig in and try and find as much direct language from RJ as much as possible, because this would be a fun question for me to ask if I ever had the chance, of how much of this was on purpose, or were you thinking about this when this happened? But so many of the dark friends that we meet follow this pattern. Asmodine is a good one, that he was kind of a loser. He wanted immortality to establish himself as this great composer, as this great artist.
Well, he probably saw the pattern that is of all classical composers, where your work is famous after you're dead.
Who was it? Was it Simmerhaj, who used to take a little bit of pain from healing because that gave her a thrill? Uh, and and rather than being exalted for her incredible ability at healing, she was castigated because she did this one little thing. How dare you? I'm awesome. So she was a supreme narcissist who was a loser. Not that she didn't have talent, but that she didn't achieve the height that she felt she was owed.
Well,
And
this is part of this is the overlap between the tetrad. She was a sadist. She was a sadist, and there's a little overlap with narcissism there. But truthfully, she was a sadist.
Oswald was bounced out of the Marine Corps because he kept getting in fights with superiors, because he thought he knew better. He thought he was owed a degree of respect that you do not get in a military hierarchy, period, until you reach, certain levels. Booth was a double loser because he came from a family of actors. I think he was one of 3 brothers, and one of his other brothers, if not both of them, were more successful and more well-known than he was. So he had that element of it. But then he also was an ardent supporter of the South, the Confederacy, and slavery, but throughout the entirety of the war could not bring himself to actually enlist in the Confederacy. So you have that degree of guilt and loserness added on top of it. Is, I think I'm awesome, but there's going to be this negative feedback loop in your mind of, but why can't I bring myself to go fight for this cause that I think is so great? And so both of them decided that they would show the world how awesome they are by killing a great man, and thereby, in their minds, assuming his place. And you see that with the Dark Friends over and over uh I mean, that's the title of this. It is a well crafted, it's an obvious illusion, but that doesn't make it any less impactful and well written. Because again, Jordan doesn't tell you, he shows you. He doesn't tell you these people are also insects. He shows you the insects, as Carradin's looking at them, not really paying attention because he's annoyed by this person. And then you see it unfold with the people, where Samael comes in and just bitch slaps Carradin, who thinks he's this great, awesome thing. But in front of this greater power, he has to be pathetically subservient. And then Samael leaves, and now he's no longer putting up with Millie and her whining and ranting. He literally grabs her by the throat and says, I'm the boss and I could kill you right now and you could do nothing to stop me. He has to crush this thing that's below him to make himself feel better.
Which is normal primate behavior. Alpha beats up beta. Beta doesn't attack alpha. Beta goes and beats up delta.
And you see a little bit of that from Samael as well when he's talking to Carradin is, I don't care what other people have told you. When Carradin tells him, I saw Cawthon, I saw Matt Cawthon, he's here. Because he still has that imprinted on him, which is something else I forgot to mention, what I think is really cool about this chapter is how, we're calling way back to the prologue of the Great Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
in that scene, and it's more than just they were shown this. Is something happened, something supernatural was done to them, and he feels a physical effect when he sees Matt Cawthon, and he feels, I think there must be some level of compulsion that happened here to imprint this on their minds, that he feels a physical effect that makes him want to carry out these orders. But Samael says, no, I'm the man, I'm the boss, I'm better than these other people. You're going to follow me.
I wonder if it's something that's addressed. Would compulsion not go away when the person doing the compulsion is killed?
Write that down. Because actually, I think we get that explained well enough at the end of the series. I think we have an answer to that. All right. Any other thoughts on this chapter before we
No. My main thought was that initial one of the entropy. It was just the timeline, because we want to keep things in perspective with Rand being one with the world, so to speak.
Oh, I got the chapters out of order. Okay, so the 16th chapter is Tug
of War Matt.
Yep, it's Tug of War Matt, and it's I hadn't thought about this before, but it's Matt has 2 Me Too movements within a half hour of each other. Because that's kind of what's happening to him here with the tug of war too, before he even meets Dylin, who tries to undress him. Much like with Aviendha's point of view between the girls, I like that we get this, besides just that Matt's fun and it adds some levity to, a lot of seriousness as the story has been getting darker and darker. Uh, I like that we get his point of view with this because you can tell that something serious is going on here between the two groups of Aes Sedai, but Matt is so flippant, and you can see because it's from his point of view. He ain't no dummy. He knows that this is serious, but on one level, he's going to try and disarm the situation with charm. But on another level, it's by gum, I'm not going to let myself be used by these people. I'm not going to let myself be subservient to these people. I'm going to, even if in the back of my mind I'm worried about these two groups of women, I'm not going to let them see it. I'm going to smile. I'm going to be flippant. I'm going to tell jokes because I'm just that stubborn, damn it.
I wonder if Jordan was influenced in his naming of people and scenes like this. Jolene, Jolene, don't you take my man.
I hadn't even thought of that. Somebody redid that song recently and it was awful and I hate it. But because Dolly, I think, is one of the top 10, if not one of the top 5 country artists of all time.
Oh yeah, definitely. One of my favorite scenes with her was on Letterman where they did a top 10 things you didn't know about Dolly Parton. And number one was I
I
have a
don't
nice
remember
ass
that.
too.
It's like one of the gazillions of memes of nice boobs, and then it's wait, there's a fill in the blank here in this picture because obviously the guy's just staring at the one thing. Uh, I like that this on top of just being fun. I've mentioned this before, and this is a good scene for that. Is you've got a good writer, whether it's on the page or whether it's a script for a play or a movie, you know you have a good writer. Uh-oh. Hey, WikiHow actually finally told me something useful. Um, you know you have a good writer when you have scenes that do more than one thing. So, on its base surface level, the first half of this chapter, this scene is simply getting Matt from point A to point B because he needs to warn the girls about what he's discovered. Then you get the the showing of the schism in the tower and how, at least for now, it's a Cold War because we follow different Amarillans, but we're still Aes Sedai, for one, and for two, we can't show the outside world that it has come to fisticuffs. So there will be jockeying for position, but it will be rhetorical. It will not be physical. So you get that element of it, of the jockeying for position, of the trying to kind of navigate this weird thing that for most of them we know because we've started to learn that there is a such thing as a secret history. That the White Tower has not been as unstained as they would like the world to believe, but very few people actually know that. Um, but as far as they are concerned, the White Tower is white for a reason. It is unstained. It is the only pure thing in the world and in history for the last 3,000 years. So you get that. But then you get set up for stuff that's going to happen later with all of these characters. Um, with the sisters, Adelaide or Vandine, I can't remember which one here. With Marilil the Grey, and then with Teslin and Jolene, there's going to be stuff with them as well. So you're getting world creation. He's filling in gaps here, but he's also setting up quite a few things to come. I mean, one of them you get paid off at the end of chapter 17 because you get a short scene with Teslin and Jolene. I think it's from Teslin's point of view. So no, it's from Jolene's point of view. So you get an immediate payoff because you get a point of view from these two characters who I think we might have seen before, but we've definitely mentioned before several times. And now you actually see them and they start to get fleshed out as characters. And then you get a more immediate payoff at the end of chapter 17 with the two of them talking about that scene. So he fleshes that scene out even more, but I don't think we need to go into it in spoilers because we're going to get to it, by the end of this book. There's payoff that's going to happen, from this scene. Well, one of them we see at the beginning of chapter 17, or towards the end of it actually, where Matt finds the note in his pocket that sometime during this scuffle, which is also interesting because somebody's pretty savvy to be able to, sleight of hand Matt and not have him notice. So someone surreptitiously slipped a note into his pocket. And that's pretty cool. And so we know it was someone here, and we don't know who. So we're going to get here pretty quickly some payoffs for this scene and even more down the road. And then Matt gets me too'd by a cougar. Is she a cougar or a MILF? How would you classify her?
Well, they can be. You can be both.
See, to
she's
me,
a cougar because
older.
she's hunting.
See, to me, I've always thought of basically my categorization has always been MILF is a 30-something, cougar is a 40-something.
MILF is a mother.
Yeah.
I mean, MILF can be any age mother, but it is associated with older. But not every MILF is a cougar, and not every cougar is a MILF. So, but they can be both. And because she is a mother, and she is older than Matt poaching him, she is both. I picture her with the description as like Lucy Lawless from Spartacus, but with the dark hair from Xena. Put those two, the class from Spartacus with the dark hair from Xena, and that's kind of how I picture her.
I'm never going to be able to unsee that now because that's a great description. She would be perfect in this role. She would be perfect in this role.
Yeah, especially because she would also be able to pull off the forcefulness.
Yes, very imposing, both physically and in force of will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially if you saw Spartacus, especially that first season, which was so great. What she did in that first season, I think I had never thought of that before, and that makes me feel dumb because she's perfect. That fits perfectly here.
Just a boy with fantasies, that's all.
I like the the Matt being accidentally more than he meant to be. Not only does he, give this flashy bow, but then he greets her in the old tongue basically, which I don't think he meant to do. Do you want to get into Dylin right now, or do you want to wait until things escalate later?
Let me take a bathroom break and we'll figure it out.
All right, so little pause there to I don't know, maybe it's because we're in Ibudar, I was feeling tropical, so the good coconut rum I got you, I was tempted to bust into it because they sometimes carry it at my liquor store, but they didn't have any. But then I found what they did have is that same company makes a rum punch, and I'm a sucker for tropical fruits. So this is guava and passion fruit and their white rum. So, and then I threw a little ginger ale in that to make it fizzy.
I have to keep our man card, so let me pour some whiskey.
He says that, and then he drinks all kinds of fruity martinis and silly things and various fruity nonsense. Just don't tell him I said that. Okay, I wasn't saying anything at all while you were away. So they didn't have the because it's a small batch thing. They didn't have the cinnamon whiskey I found last time. They didn't have any this time, and I couldn't find any others that were infused. Everything else was flavored, and the last time I tried a flavored, it was awful, so I didn't want to do that.
Well, I just did one finger because this is 120 proof. So
All right. So speaking of 120 proof, Dylin. Oh yeah. There's a couple of things going on here that I find interesting. Um, that will definitely get us canceled. So there's a case to be made that she's not any different and not any better than oh, I should have grabbed that. Ah, well. All right, so remember when Matt's playing cards at the beginning of Shadow Rising?
Mhm.
And one of the things, I think it's a Dorian who later joins the band, is complaining about is Rand's new laws, one of which is that even a commoner can uh, bring a noble before a magistrate, which is something that is very new. It was a staple of noble privilege that a commoner could not accuse you of anything. So even in places that had started to create a rule of law as we know it today, it wasn't like we think of it today, because a farmer could bring a fellow farmer before a magistrate, a noble could bring a noble before a magistrate, and then a noble could bring a commoner before a magistrate or just kill him. But was very standard throughout the medieval era, and I say medieval era, but it still goes
No,
on.
even like
Yeah.
1920s England, and
There's still areas of elitism where that still happens. But so he's complaining that, and Matt says very sardonically, something to the effect of, it would be a shame if some farmer brought you before a magistrate because you had your way with his daughter when she didn't want to, very politely saying, yeah, it would be a shame if you got brought before a magistrate because you raped some farmer's daughter. And then the noble, who I think is a Dorian, but I can't remember, said, yeah, wouldn't it be? Because he's too drunk or stupid to get the sarcasm. So that idea has already
Dorian
been
was the one with the
established.
big nose, right? The
Yeah.
bulbous nose, yeah.
Not just bulbous, but like red,
Always
because
red,
he's
yeah.
clearly an alcoholic from. I did not know that's what gin blossom meant until recently. I didn't know that's what a gin blossom was. Is the bursting of the capillaries around your nose because you're such an alcoholic.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anyway,
So I'm not too far gone because I still have a nice nose. So Scott, here's your over under. How many times has my nose been broken just by looking at it? We'll answer it at the next episode. So you got to guess.
All right. Anyway, where was I going? So that has been established. That is a trope, and that's what Weinstein was all about. That's what the Me Too movement was all about, was the predatory male. Thailand is a predatory female. I mean, we just talked about her being a cougar. What is a cougar? A cougar is a predator.
And the key here is power.
She is the freaking queen.
Typically, males are the predators because we are bigger and stronger. But she has the power of all her bigger, stronger guards behind her as well.
But
or I should say a nation behind her.
This is where we get canceled, because there's a reason people get more outraged about a male teacher having sex with a female student than they do a male student who has sex with a female teacher. Because guys are different.
Mm-hmm.
Because this isn't a noble man forcing his way on the farmer's daughter. This is a powerful, beautiful woman seducing a man. Knowing
Seducing is a term used lightly here.
very, very broadly speaking, but there's a reason Matt doesn't act like the farmer's daughter would.
Well, there's
Because
lots
men are
of
different.
reasons. There's 2 million years of difference.
Exactly. So, you know, one of the reasons obviously is because she's the queen. You can't just punch the queen and say, "Hey, get off me. Stop undoing my laces, you crazed woman." But another reason, going back to the teacher example, is because deep down the guy wants it. If you say
Well,
that about a woman, you're going to get canceled, and frankly, rightfully so, because women are different. But
deep
for the most
down,
part,
his his investment in the situation is much, much, much lower than the females. He will replenish those sperm in 4 to 6 hours.
I wasn't expecting this. I don't necessarily want it, but I'm not going to say no because you're hot.
I mean, death by snoo snoo.
Death by
We will
snooze.
take it. But that goes way back to the fact that we have almost zero investment in it unless we get an STD.
There is a reason why, well, she was asking for it because she was dressed that way or acting that way is so repulsive, and rightfully so, when you talk about women who have been sexually assaulted, because men and women are different. And no, she wasn't, because women are different. He was asking for it. Yeah, probably. Yeah, there's a good chance he was. Yeah, there's a high likelihood because he's a guy.
Well, we got to parse terms too. She was asking for it. There can be a yes there if you define the yes. She was asking for you to make an investment into her in such a way that she is willing to do that with you, and then have the downstream effects of that.
It's
For
called
the
courtship.
Yeah. And so she does want you to make a move, but it is a move that is a long-term process. So yes, she's sexually enticing you to do that. She is not sexually enticing you to throw her down and bend her over. There is a difference. So the answer is yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the guy, it's yes, or it's no, but yeah, you've convinced me. All of a sudden, boing, 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 boing. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, not going to go too much farther because this is
If
going to escalate later, and we can
when
talk
the
about
guy
it more there.
really,
But
really, really doesn't want it, he has a defense mechanism.
yeah,
He never gets hard.
there's that, and also the fact that you can outweigh a woman by twice as much, and you are more than twice as strong as she is because of the muscle and bone
Oh, but in
density
this situation,
difference.
we've got it's a little different because she does have a power dynamic over him.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's the other wrinkle here, is that one, it's different because men and women are different. And two, it's not different because women can still be sexual beings and thus sexual predators as well.
Well, here's a good way to put it, to kind of flip it around and bring it home. A woman could always kill a man with a gun, but she still gets raped most of the time because killing a man with a gun is a complicated issue. Matt could defend himself against Dylin, who is holding a knife to his throat half the time, but he would have to do so in a way that would be, I just killed your queen.
Literally or metaphorically, knife to his
Yeah.
throat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a major complication there, in the same way that even if your life is in danger, it's very difficult for that. That is why pro-gun people will tell you, practice, practice, practice. You need to practice because it needs to become a reflex. It's why military people go through both psychological and physical indoctrination, because for most of us, there is a hesitation when it comes to lethally harming another human being.
Well, and that's one of the points of real self-defense classes is you got the motto of go to jail before the hospital, but you still have that complication of going to jail.
Mm-hmm. Especially in places that aren't America, because they're a bunch of communist assholes.
Mm-hmm.
That's there's a recent case in Canada where a guy shot a home intruder or intruders But the court ruled that they weren't threatening his life, even though there was a high likelihood they were being physical and there was a high likelihood they were about to rape his wife, but they weren't threatening his life, so he had no right to kill them. This is why every other place but America sucks.
I think it's Tim Pool that talks about this. He moved to Virginia because New Jersey, they passed basically a gun law, a self-defense law, that if there's a window in available, you have to jump through it before you can defend yourself. And it didn't matter if you were on the 10th floor.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Maybe Matt could have jumped out the window. All right.
Doesn't
So
he at one point when it comes to this?
well, he climbs out a window, but that's later. And then to add to the comic relief of what is not necessarily a comic situation, her son comes walking in. Her son who's about Matt's age. And she wants Matt to be friends with him. Oh dear. What is wrong with these people, as Matt thinks. I love the way he tries to put him off by, I'm a low-class guy who likes to go to, dangerous taverns of the low sort. Oh, I like that.
Well, see, as being someone who's dated older women with children, it puts you in a special place in their heart when you get along with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Only in my situation, there were very young children, not people my age.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's the same thought. It's the same sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we move on. So I referenced this before, chapter 17, where he goes back to the inn and he's, being in charge of the Red Arms who accidentally slipped and cut open his head. And then this is where he gets attacked. And then we've kind of already talked about it. Do you have any other thoughts on the way Anon and her husband interact here?
Oh no.
I do like that he's kind of oblique here. So does Matt know that these guys were not after gold, that they were after him? And he just doesn't want to let on that that's what they were after when he's talking about, I guess they thought to fill this empty chest with, gold and valuables.
That would be typical Matt, to know at least there's a chance with the underlying issue.
Mm-hmm.
Too many random things have had happened to him at this point to think it's all about gold. You at least have to have the thought of it could be about gold, or it could be this other thing that keeps chasing me these last 3 years.
And you just saw it a couple of chapters ago with the white plumes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what two chapters ago, white plumes, that's what that was all about, and it has continued to happen. But again, Jordan doesn't just tell you. He doesn't have Matt think, oh no, they were after me, but I can't let on that they were after me. He makes it a little bit more bleak than that. We haven't seen, she's going to become a bigger character, and this is the first time we really get to interact with her a lot. Because I think the first time we see her is when he just walks in and the dice stop and he says, I feel like I've come home, because there's dice in the corner and, a bard playing and dancing to be had. And, and that's what he wanted. He didn't want to go into the palace. And so he feels like he's come home. And now we really get to interact with her and see what kind of a person she is. And again, Matt is savvy enough to notice the looks that she's giving him. So we can infer that she doesn't buy this either. Now, the way her husband is acting, as far as he's concerned, these are just desperate cutthroats who were looking for a score. The way she looks at Matt and the way she acts, it's pretty clear to the reader She's more savvy than that. What's up with her? This is someone who is more than she seems.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that from the very beginning.
Well, and it's also
With her
the
being
male female dynamic. She is putting together patterns and looking for future danger. He is problem solving. We had a breach in security. Now let's go ahead and just fix that breach of security.
yeah.
And he's done with the thought.
Let me give you some of my men as extra security,
Mm-hmm.
and then she mentions that, you know, the other women think I don't discipline you enough. Elayne always tells me I am not firm enough when you speak out of line. I need to provide a good example for my daughters. Consider yourself chastised. I'll refrain from telling you who should haul which net on which boat. So that's page 393. And while they're bantering, this is where Matt finds the note. And so I like the way this scene ends, because we've already been canceled, so let's cancel ourselves some more. I think men have an easier time laughing at themselves than women do. I think that's a big reason why so many comedians are male and use self-deprecation. And and talk about things from a masculine perspective that are going to make men laugh, but then women will also laugh because they're laughing at the men. And then when they make a joke about women, the laughter may not be quite as hard, and you see a lot of side-eyeing going on with the couples.
Well, again, it's been a theme of this whole conversation. Men is about the do. We have the locker room mentality, but when you go out in the field, did you make the play?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we're out there, we're not being social while the mammoth is charging us. Whereas the female, it's all about the relationship, where you one up another female, which is humor. You one up another female, you have just changed the power dynamic.
Mm.
And you did it in an obvious way. So you may turn off the rest of that coalition because you put yourself above.
That's a good point. But the reason I bring it up is because Satal kind of gets the last laugh and the last word, but it's pretty clear from the way he writes the scene that both of them are dingleberries. Both of them have blind spots. And we saw that from the very beginning of this section, where we see the girls complaining about Matt because he's a guy and they just can't see from his perspective. So they're assuming the worst because the way he behaves is antithetical to femininity in so many ways. Contrasted with Lan, who is incredibly masculine, but he's not anti-feminine. That's why Nyneave is so attracted to him, because he's uber masculine, which she needs, and she wants. But he isn't anti-feminine. He pushes her away, but he does it in a way that is very masculine. I'm pushing you away because I have to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
So that just makes her want him more. It's not that he's playing hard to get per se. It's why he's playing hard to get. Versus the way Matt behaves, which is how Birgitte behaves. Is why they get along so well here in a few chapters, which I guess we'll have to get to next time. And Elayne gets exasperated with her so often is because she acts like that, which is not just masculine but anti-feminine in a lot of ways.
She's the tail end of the bell curve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, she's way over on that side.
And Elayne is shifted to the left on the bell curve when it comes to femininity. She's strong and all that, but she is not masculine.
She is proper. That is what she is raised to be, is a proper feminine ideal. because that is how you establish your dominance. It's not just that you are a queen, you are the queen, if that makes sense. But so the
Could she be a cuck queen in this situation? That is actually a thing. That is the female version. Cuck queen.
I don't know.
Spelled Quean for some
We'll
reason.
we'll have to explore that in a winter's heart. That will come up then. Um, so the interaction here. Matt stuffed the note into his pocket. Does any man ever get to understand women? I don't mean just Aes Sedai. Any women. Jasper roared, and when his wife directed a meaning gaze his way, he only laughed harder. The look she gave Matt would have shamed an Aes Sedai for its perfect serenity. Men have it quite easy, my lord, if they only looked or listened. Women have the difficult task. We must try to understand men. Jasper took hold of the door frame, tears rolling down his dark face. She eyed him sideways, tilting her head, then turned, all cool calmness, and punched him under the ribs with her fist so hard that his knees buckled. His laughter took on a wheeze without stopping. There's a saying in Ibudar, my lord, she said to Matt over her shoulder. A man is a maze of brambles and darkness, and even he does not know the way. There are so many layers here that this is why it is so compelling in the scene. It's more than just it's hilarious. It's great comic relief, but it's also true. That's why the best comics, Pryor, Carlin, etc., they were just telling truths. They were just telling them in a way that made you double over with laughter.
I'm going to invoke again the great Al Bundy. Don't try to understand women. Women understand women, and they hate each other. And who would have thunk, by the way, go back and rewatch a lot of the episodes. Married with Children was one of the most profound, on point relationship shows ever to be produced.
Man, that's great. I had forgotten that. But I'm curious your take on a man is a maze of brambles and darkness, and even he does not know the way. My take on that is that is true, and that is
it's
why
situational.
That is why women have such a hard time understanding men. But they don't have to know the way because men are very instinctual.
Women think they know the way is the problem. Because again, that forward thinking, that anticipating danger, that anxiety that comes along with it. The problem is most times they're wrong. Where men choose a direction and then make a plan and then work together and form coalitions and hierarchies. And it's a lot more. I mean, I am an atypical man because I actually do things more like the woman. But when it comes to men, you have that common goal and then the problem solving that goes along with it.
I don't know if this is.
You don't know the way because you're solving the problems along the way. Where a woman says, I have this vision, and she has not thought of any of the things that could happen in between.
I don't know if this is still true, but there used to be a pretty stark difference between how boys perform in school and how they score on an SAT test. Because
that's why I have this book right here.
Because as Peterson has talked about, an SAT test is just a big IQ test.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no process to it. It's just the answer. Give me the answer. In school, you have to sit and suffer through the process, which is built in a way that does not appeal to boys. And so they're going to suffer in school performance because in order to get to the answer, you have to go through all this crap. You have to sit through all this crap. And they just want to get to the answer and work on the problem.
Well, another thing about school is it's not set up for the entrepreneur mind.
But
I mean, Elon Musk dropped out of Stanford. And he's one of the most genius people in the entire world, right? It's so we definitely need a restructuring of that, but that's for the social episodes.
Mm-hmm. Man, there's just a lot going on in these last couple of pages, and I love it. Uh,
Now that song's stuck in my head, by the way. I shouldn't have brought that up.
Men can see the problem, so to speak, with women, even if they don't know the answer, because there is a lot going on there. There are a lot of layers there. But from the outside looking in, you can say, oh, this is what's going on here. And then the reason you don't understand them is because then they don't act like you would, which doesn't make any sense to you. But as you've talked about, it's because they have a different way of looking at problems. They're building coalitions. Uh, they're trying to evaluate as many possibilities as they can, rather than finding the most direct path. And the male mind is thinking, well, your problem is this, so you should just do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the disconnect is. So there's a lot being said in those couple of pages, which is why Jordan is now problematic when he used to be praised for this stuff. And then we get a couple of scenes of extra people.
Well, let me flip the roles here. And again, differences between men and women. This is, oh, what's his name? His handle on Twitter is Prometheus, but crap. I'll come up with the name while we're talking, but male depression is usually based on feeling powerless and unable to affect one's life. Therapy models focus on helping men feel heard and loved instead of restoring their personal power. Men need solutions, not feelings. Now flip that exact thing, and we've got the situation here. Adam Lane Smith, that's the psychiatrist.
That is why I have a problem with couples therapy, is just generally
you need
speaking.
to hear, you need to hear this guy's thoughts on couples therapy, because his thing is basically 99 times out of 100 it's pointless, because couples only come to couples therapy when one side wants to make it fixed, but it's already too late.
But where oh, I'm brain farted on the technical name. Cognitive behavior therapy, is that what it's
CBT? Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy.
So if you have someone who really understands that, that can be very useful for men or women, young or old. Because ostensibly what they're looking at is why you think the way you think, and then what you can do about that, which should work for men or women. Because for a man, there's, oh, okay, I have a plan, I have a directive, I have a direction. And for women, it's, oh, okay, so my feelings are valid because of this, this, and this, and I can get around it if I think about it this way and try and feel about it this way. Versus the stereotypical, let's lie down on a couch and talk about your mother. Well, what the hell is that going to do? Right? Certainly from the male perspective, you're probably just going to make me feel worse.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the problem with therapy. I actually went to therapy for a little bit, to help with alcohol and all of those things. And it was the typical, she just listened while I talked. And I was like, okay, what do you want me to say? Just let out your feelings. I'm like, and several sessions into that, I'm like, I have nothing more to talk about. What am I going to say? I actually wanted solutions. Give me, it's a couple steps to do, maybe something to start with, this can get you on the right path. And $2,000 later, I was like, this is doing nothing for me. I could go to the bar with a couple buddies and vent.
Why is Jordan Peterson so popular with males? Because he told them to make their bed.
I still don't make my bed.
No, but the idea is he didn't just talk about your feelings. He gave you something to do. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so already kind of mentioned the Teslin and Jolene exchange there. There's not a there's not a ton except to point out that Jolene is kind of a brat, and and you get that in this scene. And
Well, and you
then
also have a big dichotomy. I think Jordan does these things on purpose. Teslin, one of the physically more repulsive women in the books, and Jolene,
repulsive, just not very attractive.
in a sense, in so much so that she, you would just, even as a desperate guy, you'd be like, yeah, no.
I'm sure there's someone for you, Teslin, but it's gonna take a while to
Why
find.
she's a red.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a reason Jolene is a green, and even more so the more we see her. Um, and then you get a little. To me, the next section with Phalion and Ispan is kind of a reinforcement of the insects chapter, as well as setting up stuff of, oh, hey, here's a tease here of knowing that that something bad is on the horizon for Nyneave and Elayne because these blacks are here and they're plotting.
Now,
Uh,
this isn't where Jordan gets too intricate with his names, because Phalion and Phaluine from the Saladar group, the one that was brought up with Theodrin, not Theodrin, that's Lord of the Rings. Starts with a TH though.
yeah, something.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the Phalion and Phalion, it's like with the first read through, you start to get mixed up. And the
Yeah,
names are so
and
similar.
there are going to be similarities, James, Jim, that kind of thing, Bob, Bill. But if you're writing and you've got a
It's
ton of characters, you want to keep it as clear and distinct as
Well, and
possible.
if you're gonna have everybody have a unique name, you want to be clear and distinct. If it was Matt, the good guy Matt, and Matt, you know, Matt Jones, the bad guy Matt, I would be able to keep those apart because I would be like attentive to it.
Mm.
But at the same time, with these similar names, but just enough different that it's not the same person, it makes it a little bit more difficult, I think. So again, especially in the first read through, because there's so many threads to the story.
All right, and then the last few paragraphs, we get the old man sitting on the barrel, and as I already mentioned, he gives you enough clues. You should be able to tell this is the same old man. Um, and let's go into spoilers there because to me this is really interesting, and I'm curious what you think here.
All right, so
Um,
spoilers, jazz hands,
yep,
we're on it.
go away. So we kind of know sort of why old man can't remember because his mind was messed with by I think it's Shamail in his guys' Balsamon. Doesn't he brag about this at one point to Rand um uh about doing something to Jane Farstrider? That I think he's the one who messed with his mind. For what reason and to what end we don't necessarily know. But that's why. So the last sentence here, or last couple of sentences, once again he pulled his hand down from his head. Sooner or later he would remember. He did not have much time left, but it was all he did have. He remembered that much. I've always wondered exactly what he's trying to remember and why he can't.
Doesn't it come down to something with the snakes and the foxes later?
It may be in that, and
Because he's integral to that storyline,
mhm.
and that would go along with being well traveled.
I wonder if they sucked out his brain.
He visited there, and the ones that breathe in your memories took a memory from him.
I wonder if it's not just a Shamael messing with his mind, like he bragged about to Rand at some point, um, But I mean,
Maybe they
this
sucked out all the memory that he's Jane Farstrider, period.
he seems to remember it at the end because he alludes to it in his death scene.
But I mean, all the
So
travels, every memory from it.
maybe the Far Strider part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because those memories had to come from somewhere when they shoved them into Matt's head.
And
So
we know the snakes eat the memories.
what if it's not just that they saw those memories, but they actually took them?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's how Matt got his memories, because they took the memories from all the people that entered the doors, according to Jordan in the interviews.
yes, yes, but what I'm wondering is when they took them, does that mean like did they make a recording of it or did they like cut and paste the file?
Well, if we
You know what
put
I'm
two
saying?
parts of the stories together, you would assume that they actually
Kind of
took the
seems like
memory.
it.
Yeah.
Like maybe that was their price.
Mm-hmm.
That was the price of the foxes for whatever it was that individual asked for, was to
And because they had
take
them
some
as
of their mind.
currency and Matt asked for it as his price, fill the holes in my head. They had these things to pull from to put in his head.
Mhm.
They didn't
And
have his own memories.
yeah, and because he asked for so much, they weren't just taking memories; they took his life
Mm-hmm.
or tried to.
Try to.
Yeah, He- he's one of the more interesting characters to me, Farstrider Noel, because he's a great example of how Jordan doesn't tell you everything. And not just tell, he doesn't show you everything. He very rarely tells you anything. He just shows. But by the end of the series, there's a fair bit of mystery still left up in the air. There are a number of things you have to infer because he didn't tell you. And I think he's a great example of that. Of it's not frustrating. I mean, it might be a little bit frustrating, but it's not like it doesn't ruin the story that you don't know for sure Noel slash Jane's backstory.
Mm-hmm.
It's enough that you can infer it, and it makes it more. To me, it makes the story as a whole more rich. All right. So, what other spoilery things did you have
I've got
that we
four
wrote down?
things. One that might get us canceled. Uh, so Elayne, here we talked about her dynamic with Nynaeve, and but as we go forward, the thought that popped into my head is, as of the time this was written and the notes were made, I hate the parallels being coincidence.
Mm,
Lion Throne and the way Elayne behaved further with Rand after this point, when she's finally able to see him again and everything, it's very parallel to like 90s feminism. I am lion, hear me roar. I am woman, hear
mm,
me roar. And Rand at that, from this point on, becomes a sperm donor to her.
mm.
She really doesn't do a whole lot that's canoodling and lovey-dovey or anything. It's he is emperor. I'm going to have his baby because I am lion throne queen.
To be fair, the canoodling lovey dovey did happen though,
She
but
took him
it
into a room and said, "This is going to happen."
no. It happened at the beginning of their relationship.
Hmm. That's why I
At
said
the
from this point forward.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So and one of the two letters she wrote him, the other was her being the Ice Queen, but that's kind of that's her personality and how she was raised is okay, the courtship has happened, now it's time to get down to business. And and business for me, the princess is I need a prince and I need an heir. And we can be lovey-dovey in private, but first things first comes the throne, comes the responsibility. Um, but again, it's all three women are archetypes, and that's kind of her archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Min is the one who is um the relationship with the capital R, the connection, the humanity part of it. And then Avienda to me is the more unknown part from my point of view is what are you doing here? What do you serve here?
We talked about the Greys and the Sea Folk going forward.
Oh crap! What was my thought there?
Well, because okay, so I'll go with where my thought was is as it made sense to some degree, even though it was a little overdone
Mm,
in this scene. But then we've get experienced negotiators. They should have the
yes,
actual texts
A-
on how the sea folk work, especially since there are sea folk in the tower.
and later when I think it's next book, uh, when Rand's Aes Sedai, I don't remember who it is. It's not Marilyn is the one here in Ibudar. I can't remember who's the gray
It starts with an M2.
that's Rand's Aes Sedai. They on
Morana.
Marana, yeah.
Yeah, Morana.
So
Yeah.
Rand does his Tavernus and makes everything topsy turvy, uh, and unbalances the sea folk, and then it
But they still
leaves
end up
you
getting the better end of the bargain.
exactly.
Yeah.
When it leaves, it talks about how Marana has this, this firm, severe look to her face, like she's sitting down to do battle, and then at the end, it's a punchline again,
Hmm.
and it's there. There should have been a little more give and take there, because even when you get the professional gray and you get the impression that Morana has been an Aes Sedai for decades, doing all sorts of treaties and negotiations and
Yeah,
things.
she's kind of pimped up as the best of the best of the Greys, which are the best of the best of the negotiators.
I think even
And
Cadsuane refers to her in that way,
mhm.
and that's
That's
high
why she's
praise
on the
coming from
ship, is
Cadsuane.
because Cadsuane's recommendation.
So I do feel that that's one of the points where in Winter's Heart, the sea folk there do get a little bit of humility when they run into Cadsuane, but that's about the only time, because every other time we see them interacting.
But they're also on land, on horses and things they're not used to, again, out of their element.
Mhm. Yeah, that was because we do see the professional go at it later, and it doesn't really turn out much better than how it turned out with Nyneave and Elayne,
Mhm.
which is one of the nits that I have to pick with the series is how the Aes Sedai start to become punchlines, and that's a great example of it.
Yeah, you get the scene where I think she's thinking back on it that Rand's going to be mad at her and everything. You could have had that exact same scene with her proud of herself, knowing how good of negotiators they are and them having the upper hand, but she got the best deal they could possibly have.
Mhm.
And there would have been nothing wrong with that scene. It wouldn't have disrupted the flow at all.
And she kind of says that, or somebody says it when Rand blows up and loses his temper over it, and somebody gives the counterexample. Well, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, so you still have these. This is your area of wiggle room where you can kind of twist it to your advantage. But I don't know that it was her that did it, and if it was, it should have been from the beginning of, hey, I did this, but I didn't say this, which means we can twist it this way.
Mm-hmm.
She should have been the one, like, showing her expertise, which we don't get enough enough of the Aes Sedai. They, like I said, they just become punchlines, and
Mm-hmm.
it weakens them, and thus it weakens the world a bit.
Let's see. We talked about compulsion, and I brought up when the person who does the compulsion is dead.
Oh yeah.
You had a thought about that, yeah?
Well, uh Nynaeve eventually finds it, and there's like there's a kind of physical manifestation of it, because she is able to find it on someone. I don't remember where she discovers how to heal compulsion, and she actually kind of sees things like with the power, she's doing an MRI, and she finds these little like needles inside your head, and she has to extract those basically to undo the compulsion. So there is a kind of physical manifestation of it, even if it's not physical in the way like a tumor would be,
Mm-hmm.
but it's kind of an invisible tumor, so to speak.
Well, remember, we stimulate one part of the brain, and you get horny. You stimulate it harder, you get aggressive, right?
So there's this
It's
kind of invisible needle stimulating something, and she has to. Same thing with the madness when she discovers how to cure madness
mm-hmm.
at the end of the series. So same idea, I think.
Well, they stimulate it using magnets. So I wonder what polarity has to do with all
Hmm.
of these things with the power.
Interesting thought. All right, was that it? Oh.
I wrote Matt and Jolene for some reason. And I think it's because we have a lot of future with them going
Mhm.
forward. And it's almost like the roles get reversed in the caravan, but there's still this back and forth between the two of them.
Or even before the caravan, when when he shows up at the inn and she's there, and he grabs her and pulls her on his lap to try and keep her face hidden. Um, that is one of the instances where the Aes Sedai being the punchline really works, because it's Matt getting the best of her, and he's one of the main characters, and he is directly countering a character flaw, because this isn't about Jolene the Aes Sedai, or Jolene the Green, or Jolene, this area of her expertise. Her character flaw is her uh childishness, as Teslin thinks in that scene. Is she went overboard with Marilil because she still holds a grudge from when Marilil was uh uh lecturing while Jolene was a novice and an accepted. So it's not just that she's not as awesome as she thinks she is. Matt is kind of directly attacking a character flaw.
Well, and also you have a daughter, so you'll understand this. She's a beautiful woman, and as a child, she probably got her way every time with
Mhm.
dad going
Mhm.
batting the eyelashes, and dad is looking down like, "Oh my gosh, I got to protect my beautiful daughter because men will take advantage of her."
Yep. Yep. And then you add a layer of power on top of that, in the
Mhm.
same way that Dylin gets all handsy with Matt. Kind of the same principle, really, because you're adding power on top of the physical manipulation. Where are we? There we go. All right. So if that is all you have, then
You need to share screen.
no, I was just looking at your. I hadn't noticed the thumbnail you used for the last Wheel of Time episode.
Oh, Land being confused. Oh yeah, comments. Shit.
Comments. Okay. I don't remember what we were talking about here, but the first comment from Scott is the Sea Folk send weak token girls to the tower, nobody of real power or promise, and we're told they tend to stick together or be reclusive. So they choose brown so that they're just in the library and they don't have to be around people, and so they can keep their secrets. Yeah.
Well, that would also answer what some of the things we just talked about, that the Greys would know Sea Folk ways a little bit better.
Uh yeah, because you have to think that those Sea Folk sisters would at least tell something about the Sea Folk ways, even if they hide as many secrets as they can. Um, I don't remember what we were talking about though that brought that up.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Um, all right, Egwene always assumes that Emperor Rand is stuck up and self-aggrandizing because that's how she would be in his place. That's true. Um, Clear back in the Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven, she's being critical of Rand and his shielding himself from Moraine, seeing it as arrogant. She thinks she understands Rand, but since the end of the Great Hunt, she's made assumptions about him that are wrong. Well, that part is true, and a good point is that
Well, it's what
the
we were just talking about, where she was in that romance phase and she was getting to know him, but she was also blinded by romance.
it, I would actually go back farther than that, because I think the schism started in like the first third of the Eye of the World. Because remember when they're traveling, when they're still with Moraine and Lan, and I don't remember exactly when it is, but there's a scene where they get into a shouting match with each other and don't realize, and they're still trying to stay hidden and stay away from Trollocs and stuff. And And Rand realizes, oh, we were just screaming at each other at the top of our lungs, and the whole camp is looking at us like morons because we are. So the schism started then because, to your point, Rand broke the romance part of it by trying to take care of Egwene, and she didn't want to be taken care of.
No, he's talking about Elayne here. Oh no, he is talking
No,
about
Egwene.
Egwene. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What
So
what scene is that?
she starts making assumptions about him back then. So that's when I think the schism starts. But then when it becomes a big rift is the Great Hunt, because she has set herself on. Not only is she making assumptions about a Rand that are wrong, but now she's also making assumptions about herself as the future Aes Sedai. So that's when it really becomes a schism, I think. And then, to his point, it continues to compound as she's around him in the Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven.
Yeah.
Chubby gnome.
Yeah.
Looks more
Now
like a
now
chubby
I've
gnome than a young
now
Hercules.
I've got Lou Ferrigno Hercules in my head every time I
Yeah.
see Perrin. Oh
Chubby
gosh, that
gnome.
was so good. Bad 80s action.
Good, bad indeed.
Yeah. The robot creatures.
Um, Swan is under 50. She's been Emerald for a little over 10 years. That was my
Yeah,
recollection.
that's where I had her, late 40s, around 50.
Um because there was a span there uh where we're told slash implied that the blacks kept killing the Amarillans. So shortly after the Aiel War, there were a bunch of Amarillans that didn't last long, and and I think we're told that she's been the longest lasting one for a while at just 10 years. So that was my recollection there, but I couldn't remember how long she'd been Aes Sedai and how long she was in the tower before then. So
Well,
I
we look at
wasn't.
timelines. Let's say she got there around 16, which seems to be an average because that's when it starts to show in girls. Uh, 5 years as a novice would be 21. Then 5 years as an accepted would be 26. And that would have been about the end time 20 years ago. So even if you add the 20 years before she's Emirlin, at this or its current time, she's still 46. So
And the not spending I
and
don't
she's gifted, so she wouldn't have spent the maximum novice time or maximum accepted
yeah,
time.
and that is something that she talks about when she's talking to Nynaeve, even Elayne, is all the different things that go into the hierarchy, and one of them is how long you spent as novice, how long you spent as accepted, and it would and so you can infer that she and Moiraine, because they rank so highly, because so many sisters defer to them, that they didn't spend that long. I remember Elaida hating them and being jealous of them. I don't remember if Jordan ever explicitly says that it was because of, or at least in part because of, how quickly they advanced. But I know she didn't like them for a lot of reasons. Uh, yeah, we kind of skipped over this part of the part where Swan suggests that Nicola have an accident. Um, I'm not sure if her refusal is the best course. She should have taken us. Well,
Well,
I
only
think
because we know the future.
I think in the end, though, Nicola finally, she never redeems herself completely, and but it is her own undoing that um her lack of humility and lack of caution leads to her death. But her Egwene's ability to impress her does help when Egwene is trapped in the tower and put back as a novice or accepted or whatever. Because Nicola helps her win over the other students. So in that way, I think just by doing that, she's a net positive, because that was a big part of Egwene's victory while she's a prisoner in the tower.
This next one, I've got two thoughts on it. I liked figuring out how occasionally Lews Therin took over, allowing Rand to do things he didn't know how to do, but it took more leeway to figure out Nynaeve. And this is actually a very legitimate point. I do have a counterpoint to it, though, is she was a healer in a small village. And when you talk about the things she would do when she would get upset using her herbs and everything, if 1 out of 20 made it through, she was still exceptional. So the accidentally may have been a lot of trial and error to get there.
Well, the healing part of it, the way she heals, but not only the technique she uses, which is so different and so much better than the traditional way the yellows do it. That's easy to explain because that's her wheelhouse. That's what she cares the most about, and it's what she's doing in
but
her
as far as doing it
world.
by accident, we don't have current medical training like she's also very young and everything, but people do things instinctually. Half of the strength and conditioning science literature is proving Arnold right? So it's yes, but there's a lot of trial and error that goes into that. And in that day and age, if we're thinking about the times they're in, there might have been, 19 people that died, but the one person saved was still miraculous. And then that one person becomes 2 out of 20. That 2 becomes 5 out of 20. And she's just doing these things that she knew worked the last time.
Well, she's also able to extrapolate, and we see that kind of early in the Great Hunt when Siuan comes in to train them to help start teaching them while they're on their way to the White Tower, and she kind of gets in a fight with Nynaeve, and Siuan like hits her with air or something like that, and then Nynaeve slams her Siuan against the wall with it. So she's smart enough and strong enough too that has to be part of it as well, that she can see someone else do something and not just replicate that specifically, but extrapolate from that if I can do this with this weave, then I can do this as well.
Well, and we also get Jordan CYA here because through Liandrin's point of view, she was a wilder, remember? And wilders tend to find a trick, unconsciously find a trick. And Liandrin's was compulsion. She would manipulate her father, apparently, according to her looking back.
That's where she started, yeah.
And Nynaeve's trick was this trial and error thing that when she was successful, she didn't know what she did, but she just kept doing the same thing. And same with Liandrin. She didn't know what she did, but she knew her father did whatever she wanted. And so he kind of covers for that with the wilders just learning that they know how they instinctually have some sort of control, but they don't know what it is. They don't know where it comes from. And then they learn where it comes from, and then they learn the intricacies of it.
Well, there's a survivor's bias as well. That
once they make it through the sickness, and
the 1 in 20 is the ones who didn't have the trick. Well, they're gone. They're dead. It's not that, oh, this is the way to do it. It's no, these are the tails of the bell curve.
Not only that, but the ones that it wasn't natural and organic, that it was so obvious. She's a witch. Burn her.
She turned me into a newt.
Yeah, or at least exile her, depending on which part of the continent you were on.
All right. Well, that is all there is for comments and all the thoughts I have. Do you have anything more for these few chapters?
Nope.
Well, next time should be fun, and we'll see how much we can get through, because there's only a 2-chapter detour back to Karheen, but there's a lot going on there. So we'll see how quick we can get through that, because we really want to get to Birgitte and Mat getting drunk, because that's a lot of fun.
I have a meme for that, so I'll have to find a new one for this one. But
all right, well, we'll see what you can find, and we will see y'all next time.
All right, next time, Love and War.